This is a video of me forging and heat treating a knife for a challenge build set by a bladesmith called J Lee's Knives on Instagram. The challenge is to forge an integral knife in 48 hours or less out of 50mm of 20mm round bar. That is 2 inches of 3/4 inch round bar of mono steel of your choice. And to make some amount of recording of it. I was hoping to do some live streaming, but my internet is not fit for the modern age, so you get me edited and voiceovered. Lucky you. Let's get into it. So I'm starting off by squashing the round bar down to an oval that is, the sides are the thickness that I want the bolster to be eventually. I'm gonna have a finished size of 11mm, but I think I'm gonna forge it down to 12 or 13 here. And part of the reason I'm doing this now is to make the bar stretch a little bit, to make it easier to deal with the isolation that is holding and separating the material. Oops. I'm going to try and leave as much of the footage in as possible. I'm a big fan of forging, so at least with the forging, every single hammer blow is there so that anyone who's interested can watch and try and observe how I've done things. So here I've got a 12mm kiss block. I'm just going to put that in there and forge down so that the whole workpiece is 12mm thick. You can tell the kiss block is working when it starts to bounce. That means the hammer is hitting the block as well as the workpiece. It also makes a slightly different sound. Oops. And then I'm just going to use the flat dies and planish out any hammer marks. So at this point I've got quite a nice 11mm. I'm just going to find my blade height. And as we can see, the workpiece is about a third larger than it needs to be. So I've found some bits of stock. I don't generally love using two pieces. It's a bit more noisy, but there's nothing that wrong with it. If it has to be, it has to be. So we're just going to forge the height of the blade down now, also still stretching out the length of the piece, thus making it easier to hold. I meant to turn that around, honest. Just straightening out, smoothing out the hammer blows. I go diagonal on the dies like that to get more surface area, therefore less effect from the hammer, because the same force is applied over a larger surface. Okay, now I have a pretty nice even 12mm by 18mm, and it's stretched out from 50 to 85mm in length, which makes it a lot nicer size. So now I'm going to isolate the blade material. I like to essentially forge my bolster shoulders, not exactly now, but at this point. So I start with a bow tie and then squeeze out the rest of the blade material. So the first few hits I was doing there were pretty gentle, and now that I've done the bolster area nicely, I'll do the blade more aggressively. That's about halfway where I want. bit of planishing on the flat dies. So it's about 5mm, maybe 6mm thick. Got some bumpy parts here that need to get flattened down. Turn it back into an 18mm tool. Straight bar essentially. So again, diagonal on the flat dies for larger surface areas. Just a bit of resizing right at the bolster, hence why I'm being quite careful there. Getting everything nice and square and straight. There we go, that's the bolster neck established, or the shoulders. Now I want to push the bolster up to establish the heel of the knife. I have this rounded piece of steel here. I'm just going to hold it on top and push the bolster down. Putting a little chamfer on it as well. You see me turn it 45 and then the other 45. There's the heel. Now I'm going to squish a little tang on it. Same as before, I will isolate gently and then draw it out. Oh no, I was wrong actually. I decided to go back and clean up the bolster a little bit. So I'm using a 12mm kiss block here. It's actually the same piece as the rounded steel, so that I can go up on top of it and use it as an angle as well. But then I will go to the 45s there, and that gives me a really nice even octagon because I'm using the kiss block for all sides. Well, not yet, but I will be. There we go. Going inside the bolster there. Now I'll isolate and draw a tang on it. I do my isolation quite slowly because it stretches as you isolate it, so when you think your hammer blows are in the same place, often they aren't. At this point I'm pretty much drawing it out. It's gone a bit off square, so you see me putting it on some of the 45s and then going to an octagon to get it back to square. Okay, that's the first part established, and then I can aggressively draw out that teardrop in the end. Keep everything nice and square. That's me getting it into size with the part that was already established, and then I'll start the taper from there. Okay, we've got a fairly nice square straight octagon. Next up, I'll check my length requirement. I'm going to add a little extra. Checking how close I am. Yep, I've hit my mark. Just cleaning up the transition with a couple of careful blows. You can see me pumping the treadle of the hammer there for individual blows. Great, I've got plenty of extra. Gonna straighten out the tang in relation to the knife, as well as just straightening out the hammer blows themselves, and I forge in the 45s with a hand hammer. Okay, that's got them chamfered and quite straight. Next up, I've turned it around, I believe. Nope, I've got it the same way around, but I'm just cleaning up all 8 faces of the bolster. The side faces I'm making them taper just ever so slightly towards me, mostly just squaring them. Check straightness, and now it's time to do the distal taper and maybe a little bit of profile taper. Okay, so next kiss block, 5mm. This is for the whole blade, although I am leaving a little extra thick ricasso-ish area on this blade. Very careful in the bolster area. Okay, 4mm. This is for 2/3 of the blade. It looks like half, but you've got to bear in mind that it will stretch. And then I go a little bit back beyond where I started as a transition. So there's a couple of hammer blows that are kind of 4.5mm. And then switch to the last one. You guessed it, 3mm. Just the end third. Three there, 4 there, 5 there. Next up, we're just going to go over to the anvil and planish out the surfaces, remove the steps between the 3, 4s and 5s. That's just some gentle hits with this. This hammer has a very wide flat face. So you can kind of see I'm focusing on the 1/3 and 2/3 mark there. I'm hitting everywhere, but that's where it's getting the most attention because that's where the steps, transitions between thicknesses are. Okay, I think that's good. just going to give it a quick forge anneal. All of the alloys should be fairly segregated already anyway. It should have a fairly large grain, but the softer I can get it, the better. After the anneal, I'll come and draw some lines, things I need changing, just observing if there's any curves in it. There's a little bit of a bend between the tang and the body, and then the blade is not in line with the bolster. So on this one I want to essentially have a forge finish bolster very close to shape, and forge finished bolster shoulders. So I've focused really intently on that area, the transition and the bolster, and not so much on the minute details of the blade. As you can see here, I'm just drawing lines on. Often I like to forge very close to profile, but in this case I'm just going to grind it all. So just getting parallel spine and edge there. Fantastic shot. Going to use a French curve in a couple of different spots to make a somewhat compound curve. Although I already have a tip shape in mind for this. So I'm going to grab the knife that I'm kind of doing a larger cousin to. There we go. So the blade on this one comes out to about 120 millimeters long, 5 inches, although it'll be a little bit shorter than that with the ricasso and everything involved. We're at about 12 millimeters on the bolster, at 12 millimeters. And the blade height should be around 18. Just firing up the grinder. Taking some off the tang, squaring up the bolster. Now I'll grind in the profile. I'm somewhat drawing on the grinder as I go here, so I was considering an upsweep in the spine, which is why I don't grind all the way to my line. I'm also using a mixture of inside the line and outside the line grinding, based on which ruler or how I've drawn it, but I know what I'm doing, kind of. There we go. So I was coming to the inside of the lines on the edge and the outside of the lines on the spine. Now I'm going to pick it up, grind on a couple of different angles, because the bolster prevents me from grinding truly flat 90 degrees on most of the blade. Also the taper of the blade makes it tricky. Now I've decided to go to where I pretty much originally thought I should be, putting a little bit of a drop on the blade, and eventually I'll get a small amount of swage. Okay, now I'm rounding out the tang and squaring up the shoulders. I'm just removing rough material from the shoulders here. I'm not even nearly approaching my finished size. Okay, just gonna file in the choil. I'm having a sharpening notch on this one. 4mm chainsaw file. Putting some little chamfers inside the notch. Okay, here's where I'm at so far. I've forged out the distal taper and the bolster shape, drawn out a tang on it. The rest is all ground to shape, as in the profile was done with stock removal. I've ground a little choil in there, left a nice thick ricasso. This is right around 6mm, 5, 4, and then 3 down by the tip. So a nice strong distal taper on it. Should be a real tough utility knife. Pretty decent size. I'm going to put a little swage on it, and yeah, that's where I'm at so far. I'm just about to put it in the oven to give it a real thorough anneal. There's a centre line scribed, you can't see it in this light. So yeah, this is ready to hit the oven, I think, anneal it, and then I can fully square off the bottom of this with a file. Some real pro filming here. Tuck it away, nice and cosy. Go do some other jobs for a bit. This is the jig I use for getting integral bolsters flat square. So it's essentially a square tube, or in this case 2 pieces of angle iron, with threaded holes, or in this case welded bolts. I stick 2 pieces of steel in there to clamp the blade centered, and you have some adjustment between the 4 to get it nice and straight. And then welded onto the top is a hardened piece of tool steel with a hole in it, and you essentially just file all around here. I generally use a combination of safe edge files and triangular files to get where I need to go, and then this will stay sort of clamped in there. Obviously some blades being extra long, you're going to have to hold it in strange ways. I think with the blade I'm working on at the moment, it could just go right above the centre of the vise. So here I'm showing filing the material off. It's not super close, but it's not very far either. I think I've got about 1mm to go on the worst part. And the nature of the belt grinder means you get a fairly decent radius in there, so it's closest to the tang needs the most grinding, furthest the least. I'm just going to go all the way around, just basically starting it at roughly what I think is square to the file guide. You can see me cutting in on an edge there, and then just starting to hog away at the material. Here I come in with a triangular file and just touch it up to see if I'm rounding over the edge or getting close to the plate at all. I was fairly close, but not enough to stop the bulk material hogging. So I file a little bit more off, check again. Now I'm going to go onto the save edge, and I'm going to press hard against the plate, and I'm going to basically come in and cut off that last little bit just with the side of the file, using the save edge to tell me when I'm parallel with the plate. Here you can see it just cutting that last little bit. I mean, you can't Pretty slow work, but it's worth the results. There we go. That's more like it. There we go. Just keep spreading that flat area and pushing the step further back. I've skipped the rest, but there it is, finished. I'm just going to scribe some lines here for laying out an inlay. I'm just going to do a real simple silver line inlay, so I'm just going to cut it with a hacksaw blade actually. I want to sink the teeth up to the depth of the cut. That's for the size of the wire I'm using. Doesn't take too long. And again, I can use the same jig because I'm just looking for a parallel line all the way around. Going very shallow with the cuts here, so this is 1.1 millimeter wide cut by 0.6 millimeters deep. Just making sure the corner's deep enough there. There you go, the teeth are pretty much gone. Whoops. I'm going to show you one of the last ones in real time here. I'm doing this one mostly pull cutting, and it really is pretty quick. I think this one ends up taking me around 30 seconds, including adjusting the light. That's it. And then this is the last face. Okay, upsetting the channel for the inlay. We have a tiny flat chisel, small hammer, and some 3 times reading glasses. Very important. That's all it takes. Well, not really, is it? I'm going to come along with a much finer chisel just to compare the two. We have this one and this one, about half the size, a bit steeper angle. And I'm just looking to upset a tiny little lip so that I can smash it back down, well, so that there's a little dovetail inside to hold the wire, and I can smash it back down. This is almost certainly more than I need, but better safe than sorry, especially with inlaying. And then we just do that another 7 times. The light isn't right for your perspective, but I can see a tiny little lip raising as I hit it. Yes, lovely, whack. Okay, so here I'm sticking on the logos. One of my logos is a two-piece stamp. It's the same piece repeated in different directions. There we go. Although one has squashed the other a little, so I'm going to go back into the original just to bring the shape back out. That's more like it. And then I use a different stamp on the other side on some of my nicer knives. Or nicer isn't the right term. On a certain selection, I use that stamp whenever I feel like it, to be honest. Here we have some point of view of me just establishing the edge on the knife before heat treatment. I'm amazed this footage worked actually. The phone is just sitting inside of my full face respirator, hence why it's a little bit cloudy. I'm really surprised that it came out at all usable. I will probably always speed up grinding, unless I'm going to do a video on it specifically. There's only so many seconds you need to watch. And then here it is, ready for heat treatment. I'm going to do almost all of the grinding after, with a wet grinding setup. I just prefer that way, less likely to warp. Got a good thin edge on it established. Nice, thick ricasso, heat treated bolster. The inlays are established obviously before heat treatment, and then I will put the metal in after, because it wouldn't survive, or it may or may not like being in there. Oh, yeah, play a bit of Benny Hill here. Doing the vice up with my knee. So normalizing, redistributing some of that carbide and alloying elements that have all clumped together, trying to undo some of the grain growth that will have happened in the forging. Okay, so here we are going for the quench. Quenching into Parks 50. Checks for straightness. I hold it against a straight edge that's on my wall, sort of looking down it. Get it back in there to cool the bolster off. And then I'll run over and clamp it in a vise. And that's it. Just waiting for the oven to cool down. Oh, we seem to get quenching again. Nice. And yeah, I'll start editing the video together, and then it is now. Thanks for watching. Part 2 coming, question mark.